Hello, everyone. How are you doing? And welcome to another episode of the Dr. Will Show, where we have the discussions that inform, entertain, and empower educators to be the change. I am your host, Dr. Will, and I am sitting here today with Valerie Lewis. How are you doing, Val?
I'm doing okay. Thank you for having me today.
Well, thank you for being a guest on the show. You are one of the superstars in the game, and I've been trying to get you on for months, and it's so awesome to have you here. For those of you who do not know Valerie, she, with her past scope and other things, have just really been transformational. Last year, you made ISTE so intriguing to me that I wanted to go back, and I was done with ISTE. But seeing what you've been doing with the scopes and actually inviting people in, I was like, I got to get back there. I got to get back there. So for those who are watching the show, will you please introduce yourself?
Well, I am Valerie Lewis. I am an educator out of Georgia. I work with special education students at the high school level. Specifically, I work with ninth and 11th graders this year. And, Dr. Will introduced me as a superstar, and I'm far from that. I'm just passionate about what I do, and I know that there are so many of us that are trying to change the tides in education. So I'm just one of those dots that hopes to connect with other dots so we can do a powerful thing.
Excellent, excellent. So, what drew you to technology?
That is a great question. I'm one that is passionate about learning. And so, not only from the educator lens, but I just always think about there's more for me to learn, more for me to do. I'm always thinking from the student perspective, how they view education. And being around teenagers, they're very vocal about what they don't like, what is not meaningful for them, and how they feel like this is not going to be purposeful. And so I had to take a look at what are the things that they are interested in. And knowing that tech is all that they surround themselves with in terms of social media, I figured that if you can't beat them, you got to join them, and you got to figure out a way to beat them at their own game, if anything. And so when I realized how technology opened up the doors and allowed me as a learner to grow exponentially, I mean, faster than what my own district could provide for me, I said, if this is what I'm getting from it, then what will it provide for my students? And so that was that was it for me. That I knew that I had to open up portals to worlds for myself, and not just for myself, but for my students, because I want them to have more than what I was afforded.
Okay, so earlier you mentioned that you are a sped teacher, and normally on Twitter, and it could just be because I don't follow sped chat, but a lot of the technology, chats and tools and things we hear people talk about, they rarely ever bring up sped. So how have you been using technology with the students you serve?
So with technology and dealing with students with special education, the number one thing is a lot of them are just functioning grade levels behind their peers. And so we need to figure out a way to kind of assist them in that gap, help them to create better study habits, organizational skills. And so when I think about how I use my cell phone, I need to be able to equip my students to use their devices in the same manner. So when you assign students tasks and things to do, chances are you're going to find that our SPED students are very disorganized. They forget a lot. Or a lot of times for them, it's behaviorally related. They avoid the work because of the frustration that comes along with doing that task. And so I have to teach my students how to just use a cell phone for setting up notifications and reminders that I have homework due. Getting them on board with the Google Calendar that will tell them, hey, this project is here. So more so for the functional tasks, but then I'm also using technology to give my students an opportunity to have voice. So my students are blogging. They create blog posts around topics that they are interested in. I don't tell them, hey guys, I need everybody to write to me about what happened in this story, because they could have done that on a sheet of paper. I could have just assigned an essay for that. But I may say, hey, if you're into sneakers, I want your blog post to be all about sneakers, and I want you to be the expert that educates me on that topic. So now they feel like they're bringing something to the table. They feel like, oh, Miss Lewis wants me to teach her something. Absolutely. How are sneakers made? Give me the history of it. Are you planning on doing something with sneakers? Do you want to open up a business? Do you have a collection? Take pictures. I know that buying sneakers and retro sneakers are a big thing with teenagers. They're on East Bay, and teach me about that whole process. Is there a particular boutique that does it really well that might be right here in our state of Georgia or maybe somewhere else? And so when I empower students to talk about things that are interesting to them, I can then, as the educator, figure out how to check for grammar, how to make sure that their voice is heard in that. I can figure out, did you use headings and embed quotes? Did you pull the reader in, or did you just format this blog post how you would have formatted it in an essay? So when we're talking about using technology in the special education classroom, it goes beyond just those students that are in the mild and severe profound classes that may be nonverbal, and giving them some type of touch device that communicates with them. uh, I'm using Google Docs to give students immediate feedback. So as they're working on that essay, I'm not waiting for them to get to paragraph 5. I'm giving them feedback from the time they're on the introduction paragraph. Oh, I love how you hooked me in. Or do you think you could give me some more context or background information here? So as they are working, they're getting that feedback, and it's not so frustrating. I mean, it depends on what you're trying to attack, but there are so many ways to use technology in the special education classroom, and we really, really have to figure out how to get into that literacy for kids, how to get into that writing for kids, how to prepare them with organizational task management, and just prepare them for whether they're going to college or for careers that they are going to tap into. Because we know that this group that we're preparing, the competition is fierce. And if we're not preparing them on the training grounds now, they are going to be at a disadvantage already today.
Awesome, awesome. Now you've heard some good. Look, you just laid out some great things, and I'm just sitting here going like, yes, 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 over here cheerleading for you. But now I want to jump into something, because you talk about how you gave your students, you handed over ownership, and you brought out these tools that provided opportunities for students to amplify their voices. Now, I had an interview with Catlin Tucker, and she spoke about how when she started to do things like that, her students gave her pushback, because her students were so used to being spoon fed what to do, how to do. I want the worksheet, I want this. That when she said, hey, you're going to own this learning. Okay, I'm just here to sort of maybe give you a rubric or give you sort of an outline of what I want. The rest is up to you. Her students freaked out. Have you experienced those same things with your students? And if so, how did you begin the process of getting them to really shift their thinking and what their ownership was in their own learning?
Oh, absolutely. The pushback is real. And you know what? I can't blame them. I blame the system. The system has caused these students to be lazy, because instead of challenging them and holding them to a higher standard, we have lowered the bar. Each and every time we're lowering the bar. If we can just get them to do this or, do that, then just take it and just give them a grade for it. And, don't make them think, but yet we say we want them to be critical thinkers. Don't give them problems to solve, but yet we want them to be problem solvers. So the system has crippled our students. And so it takes an undoing. It takes a teaching them how to walk all over again. So the pushback is going to be real. I've had kids that say, oh, this is dumb. I don't know why we got to do all of this. Miss Lewis, you doing the most. And I say, you know why I'm doing the most? Because you've been doing the least. And so I'm having to do what I had to do for me, and I've got to pull your weight and make you realize that while I'm pulling your weight, I got you chained to this bundle as well, because you coming along this ride with me. And when they realize I'm not letting go, and I'm not accepting the bare minimum, and I'm not taking that baby vocabulary and all of that. Oh no, you're going to do this work and you're going to redo it until it meets the standards. Then after a while, they get so worn out from fighting me that they eventually give in. But I can't do this work alone. I have to put their parents on blast as well. Ma'am, I'm calling you today because your child is giving me work that is just not going to cut it in my class. And if they are going to be successful, I need them to come out of that elementary mentality. I need this vocabulary to be heightened. I need this work to be in. And I need them to be responsible to some level of, to the umpth degree, because I think it's a training process, and students have learned if they can get away with stuff, they're going to try to get away with it if you allow them to. And so I'm very tough. I'm a small package, but I pack a mighty blow. They'll let you know that lady crazy, y'all. She crazy. But they understand that I'm doing it out of love. And I always remind them, I want you to be the best of yourself. I want you to be better than you can even imagine for yourself. But I want when people look at you, they go, yo, we did not expect that of them. And I want you to shut people's mouths. And when they realize she wants us to win, and she believes in us, and she pushes us, and she builds that confidence in us, then I don't get the pushback as much. One or two, yeah, I still have to fight that battle all year long with them. But that's at a minimum. So I think once we get the parents on board, and I keep it all the way funky with the parents, I'm not that teacher that's just giving the parents what they want to hear. When they come in with guns blazing, I let them know I pack heat too. And so they go, okay, this lady right here, yeah, we ain't testing the waters with her, because they realize it's all about making your child better. And I think if we can just come together as a united front, if we can get administrators in our buildings to understand and see that you can't go being a coward. Don't be a punk when these parents come around. Because when I was coming up, those administrators weren't punks. It was a united front. Those PTSA meetings were packed. I mean, from wall to wall, parents were in there. And I'm talking about parents with the least of the education. So this excuse about parents don't speak English, parents working jobs, no, it's something that the system has failed to do to attract parents in there. Parents will make and find the time in spite of not having the time. And so I think there are a lot of components that we have to address in education, but we have to be strong-willed and strong-minded, and we have to get these kids back to a place of accountability and high standards if we want to compete with these other countries.
I hear you. I hear. And it's interesting that you bring that up, because I interviewed a teacher months ago who told me that the principals are afraid of the administrators, the superintendents are afraid of the parents, the teachers are afraid of the administrators, and the kids ain't afraid of nobody.
Right. Right.
So it's interesting when you talk about how administrators have to be honest and willing to talk to parents and say, these are our expectations. We will hold our kids to those expectations, but we need you to work with us in order to make sure that they rise to those expectations.
Absolutely. It's getting back to the village, getting back to the village mentality. Teachers alone cannot be the guiding force. Test scores can't all be blamed on the teacher and what they didn't do in the classroom. It's the village, the parents, the teachers, the students, the administrators, and the business community stakeholders that are at large, that these schools are nestled in their towns and cities. So if we don't get back to that village mentality, all is lost.
Awesome, awesome. So I now want to talk to you because you spoke about some amazing things that you're doing in education, but now I want to talk to you about that critical eye when examining which applications are worth your time and you can see will be useful for your students versus applications which really someone's just trying to sell you something to make a buck. Uh, what is your process for determining which tools that you're actually going to put into your toolkit and which tools you're just going to just let it go?
And that's a good question. So we know we get those emails and solicitors at conferences that, are pushing their product, whether it's all for the sale, the valuation of the company, or whether it's for the end result. I'm looking for what's going to help my students go from this Lexile reading level of a 250 or second grade level to getting them as close to possible as on grade level. So when I look at that, I'm always scouring and crowdsourcing from my peers and colleagues. What tools are you using? What results do you see? What do you get? Do you feel like your students are growing? What are your students' responses to the tools? Is it something that you find that they are using on their own after you've introduced it to them, or do they simply just use it when you ask them to? And so when I find that students are using things that they say, what, I'm glad you showed me, wow, this is great, then I'm going to take an extra careful look at that and say, let me look at this. Is there a freemium that comes with it? I mean, at first I'm always looking for the freemium. But then if there is that added value where I say, what, this is definitely worth my dollars and investing in, I'm going to apply that. So I'm using tools like Read Theory. Definitely I'm using the Google Apps for education, those suite of tools between Google Docs, Slides, because I feel that some of those things are in the workplace. And those are tools that students are going to be using if they choose to go to college. They need to figure out how to use, formulated Gmail, or use email to communicate with people. So when I'm looking at what are they going to not only be able to use in my classroom so that we can make sure that they are mastering the standards, but I also need to take that extra component of what's going to prepare them when they leave high school as 12th graders and go into college and not feel like they've gone into a culture shock. So consulting with my peers, hearing the students' feedback on the tool, price points definitely matter. And then just that real world, authentic preparation are going to be my criteria for selecting tools to use with students.
Awesome, awesome. So now I want to get into past the scope. Uh, Live streaming has become huge, not only in education, but even in the business world. I mean, I know people out there right now who part of their consulting is teaching organizations and entrepreneurs how to use live streaming to educate, to grow their business, to communicate their value to customers, et cetera, et cetera. Where did the idea come from past the scope, and how did you grow it to where it is now?
Well, Past the Scope EDU was definitely the brainchild of five of us, myself, Sarah Thomas, Derek Larson out of Utah, Tatul Natoya out of California, and who's our fifth person? Oh, Nicole Taylor out of Texas. And so this happened on a conversation that stemmed off of Voxer. We were talking about how the world doesn't give enough credit to educators. Usually, the women are viewed as, these old folks with no lives, or nothing really happening, nothing of excitement. And so we said, you know what? We're humans, but we're some awesome humans. We do love education and we're passionate about education, but there are other things that we are married to in our lives that make us great. There are many of us that are photographers. There are many of us that are kick butt chefs. Uh, and so we wanted a way that the world can look at us not just as educators, but to see the human side of us and those things that make us cool. So we talked about some of us that are musicians and vocalists and, just artists and just all of this. And so we said, wouldn't it be great to give the world an opportunity to look at educators through a different lens, not just the sex scandals and the cheating test scandals that happen in education, but just give them a view. And so, with that being said, we thought about how fun and creative would it be to do something on a month to month basis where educators can come together, just let their hair down and be themselves. And so Pass the Scope EDU was born. Of course, we've figured out ways to theme educationally related topics into our month to month narratives. But it started off the first month with just the five of us. The second month, 21 people were on board. The third month, that doubled to 46 people. And now it's grown to a community of about 100 people on the Voxer back channel. And so from month to month, you'll see, not consistently. People can come in and jump in. Some months, as educators, gets very busy. But we figured this is going to be a natural and an organic space for educators where you're not having to commit a lot of the time that we know we already don't have, but just come in once a month on live broadcast day, the third Thursday of every month, and scope with us. And so I think people appreciated the fact that this wasn't a space that they had to be tuned into every single day because they're already so busy, but they can jump in a few days before, figure out the topic, and then scope with us, and then be gone and jump in occasionally. And I think teachers loved that flexibility, but they loved how we could take one theme and 20 people can spin 20 different versions on that one theme, and they could be the expert and not be wrong and not necessarily be right, but be able to amplify their voice. And so I think that has been the key ingredient for growing the space, because there are no wrongs and there's no rights, and everybody is in there to support, from the person who is like, I've never scoped a day in my life, to the person that's doing OBS super producer broadcasts, people like Claudio Zavala and Brian Smith and Dan Kreiness, Stacy Lovedoll. If you've seen their scopes, they're taking it to a whole nother level. And so I think the genuineness of that community has been what has allowed us to be successful. And we started in April of 2015. And so here we are, a little over a year, going strong. 2016, April 2016.
Awesome,
Yep.
awesome. And you've also, taken this to conferences. So I remember the year before last, I was just chilling. I was like, I literally I had made public announcements. I said, the diversity sucks. I'm not going. I'm done with ISTE. And all of a sudden, I'm seeing you and others just they're walking down the street, and here they are live streaming. They're talking about what's going on, and then you live streaming Dr. Benjamin and all of these things, and I'm starting to go,
Yep.
there's a vibe here now. I'm getting a little excited. I'm like, I miss ISTE. Is that crazy? And then this past ISTE, I was like, what?
It was a
It's like
takeover.
woo! I was like, this is real here now. You had your studio going on and all those things. What made you take this on the road, and what has been the responses from people?
Let me tell you, Dr. Will, it's all of what you said. When I attended ISTE, and that was in Colorado, I figured that there are stories and there are people in that building that weren't the keynotes, that weren't the featured speakers, and that weren't the people giving panel presentations, who had a story, and that were doing a mighty, mighty and awesome work in their cities and in their districts. And what a disservice it would be for us not to be able to be introduced to those individuals. And so that was the power of the scope. Just to be able to walk up to somebody who was seated up against the wall and say, hey, how you doing? Where are you from? What's your story? What are you doing in your district? What are your takeaways from this conference? Let's hear your perspective on a session that you attended. And just to see somebody light up, like, you want to hear from me? Like, little old me. I'm like, oh no, nobody in this space is little. Everybody connected to education is doing a mighty work. Whether you have 100 followers or whether you have 100,000 followers, we are all equally important. I don't value people on the number of likes, the number of hearts, the number of followers. That to me is the least important work. What is important is that everybody's rolling their sleeves up. And so taking it on the road and taking it to conferences meant that we were breaking down those walls. It shouldn't be a cult kind of like event or secret club or secret society that because you were able to afford paying 500 something odd dollars for the registration fee alone, and then add on another $500 or $600 for your travel, lodging, and food expenses. So you're talking about $1,200 to $1,500 just because I might not have had those dollars to be able to do that, or my principal or my district couldn't afford to send me, that I would lose out on this opportunity. And so it was a matter of breaking down the walls to say, everybody should be afforded to be able to get a glimpse. And something that you mentioned, Will, was very powerful because a lot of times the conferences looks at live streaming as a threat, and they look at it as, oh no, you're taking money away from us, or by you live streaming it decreases the value of what we're offering. And I beg to differ. So a lot of the responses that we've had is exactly what you mentioned. People now interested to say, wow, I saw what you did in Colorado, definitely saw what the team did in Texas this year. I definitely want to be in the building in Chicago, because there's something about that face to face that you just still can't get through live stream. There are those elements that the conference offers that you're like, I got to be there. And so people were so grateful for the opportunity to be able to see in real time what was happening, to meet people that perhaps they never knew about, that weren't the keynotes, that they were just regular Joes and Janes and Tanikas, just like them, and say, wow, I want to connect with that person, or I see myself in that person, or that person's story is similar to mine, or I need my students to connect with that classroom. And so I think that we have to get out of this idea of clutching our purses real tight and just keeping things safe, and just say, hey, if there's learning to be had, let's kick down those walls and let's don't allow any barriers. And so that squad of about 14 educators that represented Pass the Scope EDU, I mean, they took that place by storm and brought you every aspect you can think of, from student showcases to the poster sessions to the keynotes to the behind the scenes, the making of ISTE. I mean, you didn't miss a beat, to the town and tourist attractions. That was the goal and the purpose, to make you feel like, wow, I was there and I definitely want to be there next year. And so I'm hoping that conferences will be available to allow us and others like us to say, you know what? If people are going to invest in this conference, we have to trust that they will. And we won't take anything away from them by saying, oh, no, we don't want people streaming and carrying on in that manner. And, just allow people to learn and allow people to grow.
No doubt, no doubt. And between that and the pictures that were going on via Twitter, I told the wife, inshallah, Chicago, we're there.
Absolutely.
And so I'm just like, whew,
And
I was
look,
just
we got an interview set up for you already, Dr. Will.
well, awesome. I appreciate that. So I want to begin to wrap this up by asking for your advice for those educators who they're seeing what you're doing and they're saying, I want to do more live streaming of my classroom or conferences that I attend. How do they start that process? How do they plan how this thing works? I know when things go live, it's live. You can't control that. But in terms of the preparation of, okay, this is how I'm going to work this out. How do they do that? And how do they begin to even uh, look at platforms? Because you have you can do live streaming via YouTube, you can do live streaming via Facebook, and of course you have Periscope. So how do they, begin to even figure out which platform they're going to use?
Absolutely. And that's a great question. So, in order to get started, I think the first thing that you want to figure out is, what are you trying to accomplish? So, it's not just, I'm just turning my camera on just to show people where I'm at and what's happening, but think about, what is the goal that you're trying to accomplish? Is there a particular message or theme that you want communicated? If that is it, then you need to start to find where that message and theme is being amplified and kind of make that your ground. Stacy Lovedoll and Tatul Natoya, they love science, but they also love students. And so they have kind of made that their niche. They find how to amplify student voices at conferences when they attend, or how to amplify student voices when they go around to different schools in their district or in their state. And so they have figured that that's what they want to do. And so that's the topic that you'll see the common thread of their streams. So figure out what that thing is. It may be one, it may be two. You don't necessarily want to be all over the place. Narrow that down and figure out what you want to amplify, and then figure out where that's being showcased, and be that person now that's the go-to. So when I think about, if I want something on students, I'm going to automatically think Stacy and Tatul, because I know a lot of what they do focuses on that. And so think about, what would people recognize you for? What makes you the expert in this area that they go to? So have that plan. Think about those stories that you want to unfold. Always think about including everyone in that story as well. It can't just be all one group. You got to think about covering it from every angle, because people are everywhere. And so you want to tap into a multiple audience. You don't want just one group of people following you. When it comes to platforms, now that's going to be based on the device that you use. Your connectivity is going to be important, the accessories that you have. So YouTube, there are places where you can stream multiple platforms. You can stream to Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube all at the same time. Now that comes with a cost, to be able to do that. So if that is not an investment that you're willing to make at this time, then you may just think about the platform that you're most comfortable with. I've not done a lot of Facebook live streams because my audience on Facebook is different. My audience on Facebook are my friends that I grew up with from my younger years, and perhaps some of my high school friends. And they may not be all into my professional thing. They know what I do. They see what I'm doing, but they may not be the people that tune in. So for that reason, I choose not to stream to Facebook, but I do stream through Twitter because that's where more of my professional audience is. So you need to think about, if I'm streaming to this platform, who exactly is tuning in? Who am I reaching? Is there going to be a dialogue and conversation with those group of people, or are those just people like, oh, she doing something on there today, and then they tune out? Because then you're not really reaching anyone. You're just streaming for the purpose of streaming. So you need to be intentional and purposeful. And I think that will help you answer, where do you focus your attention on and build. But wherever people are, you should be reaching them in some capacity. Whether you may live stream here, but then maybe you follow up with a blog post on a different outlet. But some way, somehow, people know that there is somewhere that they can tune in. So just kind of take your time. It's not going to be you an expert overnight. Crawl, baby steps. Don't let it overwhelm you, and just learn how to perfect your craft. It will speak to you and let you know what you need to iterate, what you need to revise, what you need to do. The ideas will flow. People will give you feedback, and you'll continue to grow from there.
Awesome, awesome. In the words of Jay-Z, I'm a hustler, baby. I just want you to know. It ain't where I am, but where I'm about to go. Now, I went there to say that, Sarah has EduMatch. We know that Angela Myers has her You Matter, and you are killing it with this Pass the Scope EDU. Where do you see this going? And have you given thought in terms of how this is going to be incorporated, packaged, and actually become a business where not only you can help further what your mission is, but also to build something for yourself in the future?
Absolutely. So, with our planning committee and group, those are talks that we've been having. Where do we go with this and how are we going to fashion this? So, obviously, right now, what we are working on is just being that go to for conferences. So, that's our next step. Educational conferences, and maybe those that aren't even educationally related, but our educational conferences are our next targets. We saw the incredible amount of feedback that we got from ISTE this past summer, and we recognized that there is a need and there is a want, and people were appreciative of not just someone turning on the camera and streaming, but the quality in the scopes and the intention and the thought that we put behind it. It was a whole production and a working behind the scenes to get all of this going. And so, with that being said, we realize that we need to be intentional, we do need to be strategic, and we need to get this out there because there's a whole international market that's going, hey, we got a glimpse into what's happening in the US, and we may need to be doing some of this same thing over here and overseas. And so, yes, we are looking ahead. Um, we have thought about those copycats because, hey, we know nothing new exists under the sun, so to speak. And so, has that been a fear of, will somebody take your idea and run with it and go? That's always a fear. In business, when you're thinking about the business model, there's always what's going to stop somebody else from doing this very same thing. And so I think the group that we have put together, those are things that we are still trying to figure out. We don't have all the answers, but we do know that we're not stopping here. We are going to grow. We want to keep our space in our community as organic as possible. We don't want to exploit anyone. Um, and we don't want anyone to think that we are taking advantage of them, but we truly want this to be a space where people feel empowered because people in their very own buildings, in their very own districts, have been muted. And so now, as educators, they're doing the bare minimum. And we want to get back to a place where we empower educators, where we empower teachers, and we let them know that they do matter. The things that they're doing in their classroom, the world deserves to be able to see that. And so, those are things that we are trying to craft and figure out. How might this be the new form of evaluation? An evaluation model that administrators use to showcase the great things that are happening in their building where other people can learn. This is a form of professional development. Makisha Rogers, she called it pop-up PD, where you can get little sound bites and learn things from these educators and improve your craft. So I think there are a bunch of facets that we now just need to sit down and figure out how to package in a business model and just make it work and go for it. Hey, is this going to be something that we're saying, I'm going to be a millionaire over? Nah, I'm not saying that, and I'm not even looking for that. But I do want it to see it change the face of how we view education. And for me, that is going to be the most rewarding of this process.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you again, Val, for being a guest on the show. This has been awesome. A great Sunday morning treat for me. I
Absolutely.
cannot wait to share this bad boy on Twitter and such. So people, you know this is going up on my blog. This is going to be on YouTube. Please subscribe to my channel. I'm sharing this on LinkedIn, Twitter. It's going up on SoundCloud and iTunes. So you know how we do this around here. Thank you again, Val, for being a guest on the show.
Thank you, Dr. Will, for having me, and I look forward to many more. I'm going to see you at ISTE.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. As always, people, invest in you. EDU. Peace.